Hudson stood frozen in the shadows at the back of the crowded church, listening as his own father read aloud the obituary bearing his name and painting a false straight life he never lived. Moments later, the heavy doors creaked open and Lincoln stepped inside, his determined eyes locking onto Hudson's and sending the entire room into chaos as the carefully constructed lies began to crumble. The air in the small Illinois church felt thick with the scent of lilies and polished oak pews, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows in bright shafts that made the whole scene look almost too perfect for the grief it was supposed to hold. Hudson's heart hammered against his ribs as his father's voice cracked over the words. Hudson Reeves, beloved son, brother, and friend, taken far too soon in a tragic hiking accident in the Rockies. He lived a quiet, devoted life, always putting family first. Never one to settle down but cherished by all who knew him. The description stung like salt in an open wound. Quiet, devoted, never one to settle down. It erased everything Hudson had fought so hard to hide. The truth that had driven him to stage his own disappearance 6 months ago after that rail accident left him bruised but alive. He had chosen to vanish, to let the world think he was gone, so he could finally breathe as the man he was without the weight of his conservative family's expectations crushing him. But guilt had pulled him back here today, disguised in a borrowed suit, sitting in the last row where no one would notice the man they had buried. He just wanted to see them one last time, to say a silent goodbye before disappearing for good with the only person who truly knew him. Now Lincoln was here, walking down the aisle with that steady stride Hudson knew so well from their shared apartment in New York, the one they had built together in secret over 4 years. Lincoln's face was pale but set with purpose, his light brown hair catching the light as he moved past rows of sobbing relatives and friends from the small town. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Who is that?" someone murmured. Hudson's mother clutched her handkerchief tighter, her eyes red-rimmed. His sister, Emily, turned in her seat, confusion flickering across her face. Lincoln reached the front pews before stopping, his gaze never leaving Hudson's. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then Hudson's father looked up from the paper, following the stairs, and his face drained of color. "Hudson." The name came out as a choked whisper at first, then louder. "Hudson." Chairs scraped as people stood. Hudson rose slowly, his legs unsteady, the secret he had buried with his fake death now cracking open like the earth after a quake. Lincoln didn't hesitate. He crossed the remaining distance in 3 strides and pulled Hudson into a tight embrace right there in the aisle. The kind of embrace that spoke of nights spent talking until dawn, of quiet promises made in the safety of their hidden life. "I couldn't let you face this alone," Lincoln whispered against his ear, voice breaking. "Not anymore." The church erupted. Hudson's mother gasped, dropping her purse. His father stumbled back from the podium, the obituary pages fluttering to the floor. "You're alive? How? And who? What is this?" Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming as the realization hit her like a wave. The man they thought dead was standing there, alive, and the stranger holding him wasn't just a friend. Hudson felt the weight of every unspoken year pressed down, the identity crisis he had run from now staring back at him in the faces of the people he loved most. He had sacrificed everything to protect them from the truth, to give himself a chance at happiness with Lincoln, but stepping into this light was shattering it all. His mind raced with the consequences, the misunderstandings already forming in their shocked eyes, the betrayal they would feel when they learned he had chosen to die rather than come out. Yet in Lincoln's arms, for the first time in months, Hudson felt a spark of something real, something worth fighting for. The funeral had ended, but the real storm was just beginning. The drive back to the family home on the outskirts of town was silent except for the crunch of gravel under tires and the occasional sniffle from Hudson's mother in the passenger seat. Lincoln followed in his rental car, giving them space but refusing to leave Hudson's side. Hudson sat in the back of his father's old truck, staring out at the familiar cornfields rolling by under the bright afternoon sun, his mind replaying the church chaos like a loop he couldn't escape. "Son, you have some explaining to do," his father had said through gritted teeth as they left. the words heavy with the same disappointment Hudson had feared since he was a teenager. The obituary reading had painted him as the perfect straight son, the one who would eventually bring home a wife and continue the family line in this tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone. Now that illusion was gone, replaced by the raw truth of his survival and the man who had claimed him publicly. As they pulled into the driveway of the white two-story house with its wraparound porch, memories flooded Hudson. This was where he had grown up hiding who he was, where Sunday dinners meant listening to his father rant about the way things should be, and his mother gently steering conversations away from anything uncomfortable. He had met Lincoln during his sophomore year at the University of Illinois in Chicago, a chance encounter at the campus coffee shop where Lincoln, a teaching major with an easy smile and kind eyes, had offered him a seat during a crowded finals week. Their first conversation stretched into hours, talking about books, dreams, and the pressure of living up to expectations. By the end of the semester, friendship had deepened into something neither could deny. They kept it quiet at first, stolen weekends in Lincoln's off-campus apartment, late-night walks along Lake Michigan where Hudson could finally breathe without looking over his shoulder. But the secret took its toll. Every holiday home meant Hudson fabricating stories about dates with girls to satisfy his family's questions. Lincoln understood, never pushing, but Hudson saw the hurt in his eyes each time he left for Illinois. "I love you enough to wait until you're ready," Lincoln would say, but the words only deepened Hudson's internal conflict. He wanted to be the man Lincoln deserved, open and proud, but the fear of losing his family, of the whispers in town, kept him trapped. Then came the hiking trip in Colorado 6 months ago, a solo escape to clear his head after another tense family visit. The fall on that remote trail had been real, the broken leg and concussion leaving him hospitalized under a false name to avoid alerts. In that hospital bed, staring at the news reports of his missing status, the idea formed. If the world thought he was gone, he could start over in New York with Lincoln, free from the prejudice that had suffocated him. He staged the rest, letting the search conclude with a body never found. Lincoln had been devastated at first, but Hudson had reached out weeks later, explaining the plan in a tearful call. "I did it for us," he had said. Now, sitting in his childhood home, Hudson wondered if Lincoln still believed that or if the hurt of the deception had changed everything. His mother poured coffee with trembling hands, setting mugs on the kitchen table where the family had gathered. "We thought we lost you, Hudson. We buried an empty casket." Her voice cracked. Emily sat beside her, eyes darting between Hudson and Lincoln, who stood quietly by the door. "And him? Is he? Are you too?" The question hung unfinished, but the implication was clear. Hudson took a deep breath, the words he had practiced in his head for years finally coming out. "Lincoln is my partner. We've been together for 4 years. I couldn't live the lie anymore." The room went still, the weight of his confession settling like dust after a storm. His father's face hardened, the same expression Hudson remembered from childhood arguments about sports and girls. Misunderstandings were already brewing, the betrayal of his fake death mixing with the shock of his identity. But as Lincoln stepped forward and placed a steady hand on Hudson's shoulder, Hudson felt the first flicker of strength. This was the turning point, the choice that would force them all to grow or break. The days that followed blurred into a haze of tense conversations and sleepless nights. Hudson and Lincoln stayed in the guest room of the family home at his mother's insistence, though the tension in the air was palpable. Hudson's father avoided eye contact, burying himself in farm chores, while Emily peppered them with questions that ranged from curious to accusatory. "How long have you been hiding this from us?" she asked one evening over dinner, her voice laced with the pain of feeling excluded. Hudson explained as best he could, the words tumbling out in the quiet kitchen light. He described the years of internal struggle, the nights he lay awake wondering if loving Lincoln made him less of a son, the pressure from town gossip about settling down that had pushed him to the edge. Lincoln listened, adding gentle details about their life in New York, the apartment they shared, the simple joys of cooking together after long days. But he kept the focus on Hudson's journey, respecting the space his partner needed. Flashbacks to their college years kept surfacing in Hudson's mind as he tried to make sense of it all. He remembered the first time he had introduced Lincoln to a college friend as just a roommate. The lie burning in his throat even then. Lincoln had never complained, but Hudson saw how it chipped away at them both. Their relationship had grown through small acts of courage, like the weekend they drove to a quiet cabin upstate, where they could hold hands in public without fear. Those moments had sustained Hudson through the holidays when he returned home to play the role of the straight son, attending church picnics and dodging setups from well-meaning aunts. The identity crisis had peaked during his last visit before the accident, when his father had clapped him on the back and said, "You're the last of the line, boy. Time to find a good woman." The words had sent Hudson running to the Rockies, seeking clarity in the mountains, only to find the opportunity for escape instead. Lincoln's arrival at the funeral had been his own act of love and defiance. He had learned of Hudson's plan through a cryptic message but couldn't stay away when he heard about the service. "I thought if you were going to face them, I should be there," he told Hudson late one night in the guest room, their hands intertwined under the covers. The misunderstanding between them simmered, Lincoln admitting the hurt of being left in the dark about the full details of the fake death. "You sacrificed us both for this," he said softly, but there was no anger, only the quiet pain of a man who had mourned unnecessarily. Hudson squeezed his hand, the decision weighing heavy. He had traded family for freedom, but now the return was forcing a reckoning. Friends from town stopped by, their reactions mixed, some offering awkward support, others pulling away with polite excuses. The societal pressure Hudson had fled was circling back, whispers at the grocery store, stares at the gas station. By the end of the week, a fragile truce formed around the dinner table. His mother asked Lincoln about his teaching job, a small step toward acceptance. But Hudson's father remained distant, the betrayal of the staged death cutting deep. Hudson spent hours walking the fields with Lincoln, talking through the choices that had led them here, the growth he now saw as necessary. The crisis had awakened something in him, a resolve to no longer hide. As they sat on the porch swing one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in oranges and pinks, Hudson turned to Lincoln. "I don't want to run anymore." Lincoln smiled, the kind of smile that had first drawn Hudson in, and in that moment the path forward felt possible, even if paved with more confrontations. The confrontation came to a head on a rainy Saturday afternoon when Hudson's father finally spoke his mind in the living room. The family gathered around the old coffee table littered with photo albums from Hudson's childhood. "You lied to us, son. You let us bury you. For what? This?" He gestured toward Lincoln, his voice thick with a mix of anger and confusion. Hudson felt the words like a punch, but he stood his ground, Lincoln beside him offering silent strength. The misunderstanding ran deep. His father saw the fake death as selfish abandonment, not the desperate escape from a life that felt like a cage. Hudson explained again, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, how the prejudice he faced growing up in their small town had eroded his sense of self until the accident gave him a way out. "I was drowning, Dad. Loving Lincoln isn't a choice I made to hurt you. It's who I am." Lincoln shared his side too, the weeks he had spent grieving a partner he thought lost forever, the relief when Hudson contacted him, the sacrifice of keeping the secret even from his own family in California. The room filled with raw emotion, tears from his mother as she flipped through photos of Hudson as a boy, seeing now the quiet sadness she had missed. Emily spoke up, admitting her own struggles with understanding but wanting to learn. "You're still my brother," she said, reaching across to squeeze Hudson's arm. The societal pressure extended beyond the family, with neighbors calling to express shock and some withdrawing invitations to community events. Hudson felt the isolation, the same isolation that had driven his decision, but this time he faced it with Lincoln's hand in his. In quiet moments alone, Hudson reflected on the trade-offs. He had sacrificed the comfort of his old life for authenticity, but the return had forced him to confront the hurt he caused. Lincoln's presence was the anchor, their late-night talks revealing layers of their relationship Hudson had taken for granted. One evening, They drove to the nearby lake where Hudson had learned to swim as a kid, sitting on the dock as rain pattered on the water. "I betrayed your trust by not telling you everything about the plan," Hudson admitted. Lincoln turned to him, raindrops clinging to his lashes. "But you came back. That's the choice that matters now." The exchange deepened their bond, turning misunderstanding into mutual respect. Hudson's growth was slow but real, the internal crisis giving way to a quiet confidence as he began to imagine a future where he didn't have to choose between family and love. The family dynamic shifted in small ways. His mother invited Lincoln to help with garden chores, asking gentle questions about their life in New York. His father, though still reserved, joined them for a walk one morning, the silence less hostile. Yet the pressure lingered, old friends from high school reaching out with mixed messages, some supportive, others questioning. Hudson navigated each conversation with newfound patience, the pivotal decision to reveal himself marking the start of his awakening. By the end of the month, they packed to return to New York, the Illinois chapter closing but not ending. Hudson hugged his mother tightly at the door, promising calls and visits. As they drove away, Lincoln in the passenger seat, Hudson glanced in the rearview mirror at the house fading behind them. The collapse had been painful, but from the rubble, something stronger was emerging. Back in their New York apartment overlooking the bustling streets, Hudson and Lincoln settled into a routine that felt both familiar and transformed. The city lights twinkled through the windows at night, a far cry from the quiet Illinois fields, and Hudson found himself breathing easier for the first time in years. But the aftermath of the funeral revelation followed them, phone calls from home bringing updates and lingering questions. His sister Emily texted daily, sharing articles on LGBTQ acceptance and asking about their life, her support a bridge across the distance. His mother called weekly, her voice warm but tentative, inquiring about Lincoln's teaching days and Hudson's architecture projects. The family was trying, but the wounds of betrayal and shock ran deep, testing Hudson's resolve daily. Lincoln's hurt surfaced in unexpected ways, the sacrifice of those mourning months leaving scars. One night after a long day, they sat on the couch, Lincoln's head in Hudson's lap. "I understand why you did it, but it felt like you left me behind too," he confessed. Hudson stroked his hair, the conversation opening old doors to their shared history. They revisited the college days, the hidden dates, the way Hudson's fear had kept them in the shadows even in the city. The relationship faced its own crisis, misunderstandings flaring when Hudson hesitated to post photos online or introduce Lincoln fully at work events. "I thought I was free now," Lincoln said quietly. "But the old fears are still there." Hudson saw the truth in that, his identity crisis evolving into a new challenge, learning to live openly without the safety of secrecy. A pivotal moment came during a weekend visit from Hudson's mother, her first trip to New York. She stayed in their guest room, the apartment filled with the scent of Lincoln's homemade lasagna. Conversations stretched late, his mother sharing stories of her own youthful dreams she had set aside for family. "I don't understand everything," she admitted one afternoon in Central Park, watching joggers pass by, "but I see how happy you are together." The words were a lifeline, easing the societal pressure Hudson had carried. Yet his father's silence weighed heavy, letters arriving with clipped updates on the farm but no mention of Lincoln. Hudson decided to fly back alone for a weekend, confronting his father in the barn amid the smell of hay and oil. "I can't change who I am, Dad, but I can show you the man I've become." The talk was raw, filled with awkward pauses and honest admissions, his father admitting the fear of losing his son again. No full acceptance yet, but a crack in the wall, a willingness to try. Hudson returned to Lincoln changed, the growth evident in his steady gaze and open affection. They attended a local pride event together, hands linked in the crowd, the experience solidifying Hudson's awakening. The trade-offs had been worth it, the betrayal giving way to deeper trust. As fall leaves turned in the park near their building, Hudson pulled Lincoln close on a bench. "Thank you for walking in that day. It saved us both." Their future stretched ahead, not without challenges. but built on choices that honored their love. Months later, the Illinois family gathered for Thanksgiving, the table laden with turkey and sides, the atmosphere warmer than Hudson had dared hope. Lincoln sat beside him, his presence now a natural part of the scene, Emily chatting with him about teaching tips while his mother passed the rolls with a genuine smile. His father carved the bird, glancing up occasionally with nods that spoke volumes. The journey from funeral chaos to this moment had been long, marked by letters, visits, and patient conversations that peeled back layers of prejudice and fear. Hudson's identity crisis had resolved into quiet pride, the man who once hid now sharing stories of their New York life without hesitation. Lincoln's support had been unwavering, his own sacrifices acknowledged in family toasts that brought tears to everyone's eyes. The misunderstandings had cleared like morning fog, replaced by understanding and small acts of inclusion. Hudson's father had even asked Lincoln for advice on fixing the old tractor, a simple gesture that meant the world. Society's pressures still existed in town whispers, but the family stood firmer now, a united front. Hudson reflected on the pivotal choices, the fake death that had seemed like escape but led to true confrontation, the betrayal that forced growth for them all. He and Lincoln had weathered the storm, their relationship stronger, built on honesty and resilience. As they walked the fields after dinner, hand in hand under a clear sky, Hudson felt the emotional arc complete, the boy who fled now a man rooted in his truth. Looking back at the house lights glowing in the distance, Hudson squeezed Lincoln's hand. The path had been painful, filled with loss and revelation, but it had led to this authentic life they both deserved. The family inside represented not perfection but progress, a testament to love's power to heal. Hudson turned to Lincoln, the man who had walked into that church and changed everything. "We made it," he said softly. Lincoln smiled, pulling him into an embrace that echoed their first real 1 year ago. The future held more challenges, but they faced them together, stronger for every step. True or false? Faking your death is sometimes the only way for a gay man to escape family prejudice and truly embrace his identity before returning to rebuild those bonds?